Good morning, everyone. If I can just ask everyone just to turn their cameras off, please, and to go on mute, and before we make a start. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and can I welcome you, please, to the Planning Referrals Committee of Mid-Suffolk District Council. My name is Matthew Hicks, and I'm chairing this meeting, and myself and my fellow councillors will today make a decision on the application before us. So I want to move on to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, if I may do a roll call.
Yep, by all means.
Members, if you could reply when I call your name. Councillor James Caston.
Present.
Councillor Rachel Eburn.
Present.
Councillor John Field.
Present.
Councillor Peter Gould.
Present.
Councillor Lavinia Haddingham.
Present.
Councillor Matthew Hicks.
Present.
Councillor Barry Humphreys, we have apologies. Councillor Sarah Mansell, we have apologies. Councillor John Matheson.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Mellon.
Present.
Councillor Richard Mayer.
Present.
Councillor David Muller.
Present.
Councillor Mike Norris.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Stringer.
Present.
Councillor Roland Warboys.
Present.
And we also have Councillor Harry Richardson as a ward member.
Present.
Thank you.
You forgot me, Claire. Councillor Guthrie.
Oh, I
as
do
Vice Chair.
apologise, Councillor Guthrie.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda is to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members. Members, if you have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest, can I ask you to just raise your hand on the hand function, please? Okay, that's none received, so I take it there are no further declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members. Thank you. Next item is declarations of lobbying to members. I have been lobbied. Is there anyone, I think we've probably all received the same emails. Hands up if you have been lobbied, please. And I'm looking down the list, and I think that's pretty much, you can see the list there. So just to be clear, it's Councillor Mayer, Muller, Gould, Caston, Guthrie, Matheson, Eburn, Mellon, Field, Norris, Stringer, and Haddingham. Thank you very much. If you could take your hands down. And Guthrie. Thank you. Is there anyone I haven't read out that would like to come in that I've missed? No, thank you. Okay. Next item is declarations of personal site visits. Have there been any personal site visits by members? Again, if you have done that, please raise your hand so we can see. Okay, so we have one hand up, Councillor Mellon and Councillor Matheson. Okay, thank you. They've been registered. We now need to look at the confirmation of the minutes from the meeting held on the 12th of August 2020. Now, have they followed on? Claire, could you talk us through that?
No, Chair. Draft of the minutes has been prepared and they are currently awaiting sign-off.
Okay, so they'll come to the next meeting.
Excuse me, Matthew, sorry for butting in. You didn't register me for lobbying.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Roland. Thank you for your coming back on that. Okay, so those minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of August will come to the next meeting. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6 is to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Do we have any, please? None
received, Chair.
Okay, well, we have one planning application before us today. It's the land to the east of Ixworth Road, Thurston, DC 1902090. And presenting today is Vincent. So, Vincent, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check that I am displaying my screen and you can see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. So, good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen who may be listening and watching. As the Chair says, we're looking at this application for, it's an outline application, 210 dwellings in Thurston. And I'm just going to have to but there we go. Right. Now, first, I'm afraid I have to give you a short explanation for people who are listening. You may hear reference to page numbers that don't accord with the ones that you have got if you've used the online version of the agenda. And that's because the version that was sent to our councillors had a slightly different numbering system. The documents in themselves are exactly the same. They contain exactly the same information. But as you can see from this mock-up, some start from page 7, whereas others are labelled 1A to 13A. Now, this might seem a little bit confusing, but in essence, all you need to know is they are the same documents, and behind the scenes, we will manage reference to page numbers so that everyone knows exactly where we are on whichever agenda you are using. So apologies for that, but in these trying circumstances, we sent one version out ahead of the other, and there had been a little adjustment to the page numbering. So hopefully you can bear with us, and apologies for any problems that may cause. So the key parts of, I need just to explain the structure of the report, because this application has been on 3 agendas since January. So the current agenda for the 16th of September has an addendum which appears on page 7 to 19 if you're using the web agenda, or 1A to 13A if you're using the paper agenda. And this simply updates the report that appeared on the 12th of August, and members will recall we didn't get the chance to debate this item at that meeting. And since that meeting, there's been some updates. So what I've done is just bring you up to speed with what's happened in the intervening month. And then the rest of the agenda picks up the previous report of the 12th of August and also includes the one from the 29th of January. I have explained that process here. So what we're going to do is, because we haven't considered this application since it was deferred in January, I have to remind members of all the relevant issues that are germane, and we need to go through traffic implications, questions around connectivity of this site and the rest of the village, landscape impacts, questions of infrastructure, sustainability. We also need to look at the status of the current planning policy and its relationship to the made and adopted Thurston neighbourhood development plan. We need to think about our 5-year housing land supply, residential amenity, and at the end, we're going to have to do the balance, the planning balance, where we're looking at benefits and impacts. But first, I need to just give the usual caveat that this presentation merely supports and complements the comprehensive report you have before you. So this will pick out issues that I want to highlight in terms of diagrams, but the report is the thing that we will all refer to as we go through. Now, members who were present on the 29th of January will remember that this item was deferred. And at the time, and I've got the minute on the screen, members resolved that the application that they were minded to refuse, but they wanted the following points examined in more detail. So as officers, we were required to go away and do further analysis of the highway situation, particularly at the Bunbury Arms, and in terms of the Barton Road Station Hill junction and access to the station. We were required to go away and report on updates on station improvements. Members wanted greater certainty over landscape buffer around the site, and then members wanted to come back with that information. So as officers, during the intervening 9 months, we've looked again at the capacity of the Bunbury Arms junction with our colleagues at Suffolk County Council and their consultants ACOM, so I can report on the findings from that. We've looked at the extent to which mover technology, and if you remember, this is the added 106 offer from Gladman's that actually allows the traffic lights to be operated in real time. They have sensors in the road that understand where queues are forming, and they can change the lights to respond accordingly. We've gone away and achieved some enhancements in terms of connectivity, particularly to Meadow Lane, but also the rest of the village with Gladman since that meeting. We've also managed to secure enhanced crossings around the village, much improved landscaping. I can update you on station improvements, and there is now an expanded 106. So our starting point, and this was a point that was raised by Councillor Richardson when we met in January, and attracted some support from a number of members on the committee around what is the status of the planning policies and where does the Thurston neighbourhood plan fit into that spectrum. Well, the first thing we must acknowledge is that Thurston is a key service centre, and members will know that what that actually means is Thurston as a key service centre is a focus for development, second only in our settlement hierarchy to towns. So the basic presumption is that as a sustainable location, Thurston will receive additional development. So in terms of your local plan, the star represents the application site. It is outside of the defined settlement boundary for Thurston. In terms of the neighbourhood plan, again, the star is the application site. Everything in grey is what we might call the settlement. It is the settlement boundary for Thurston, as agreed in the Thurston neighbourhood plan, and you'll notice that the site is outside of the settlement boundary. This is where the issue becomes a little more complicated, because in your joint local plan, which we acknowledge at the moment carries limited weight, the site that appears in it as LA 089 is the application site. It is the council's intention going forward at this stage to allocate that site for residential development. And within the JLP, it suggests that it's capable of accommodating approximately 200 dwellings, and then there's the list of caveats that you see on that list. So an application at 210 dwellings is within the scope of approximately 200 dwellings. Now, within the JLP, the council has identified a housing requirement in Thurston for 1,468 dwellings. Now, this conflicts with the Thurston neighbourhood plan, which identifies sites capable of accommodating 818 dwellings on sites that already have the benefit of planning permission. If we factor in the Bloor Home site at Bayton Road, that was the application you resolved to grant in January. That was 210 dwellings. If you add in the Gladman site, were you to grant planning permission today, that's another 210. That would bring the total to in the region of 1,238. So you'll notice that there is a shortfall compared to the neighbourhood plan and the JLP. Now, I think certainly when we hear from the parish council, they will be saying that as the adopted neighbourhood plan, we should be adhering to the numbers within the neighbourhood plan. And that's a point we will come and debate as we go through the presentation. Now, members will recall, and I think this is something that Councillor Warboys was particularly strong on, there was concern that members couldn't fully consider the merits of this particular application when there was a lot of uncertainty about the Fishwick Corner improvements. Now, you remember Fishwick Corner to the south of Thurston was also the subject of a planning application in West Suffolk district. So on the screen, you'll note all the housing on that plan is in Mid Suffolk, and in January you resolved to grant planning permission subject to a Section 106 agreement. But if my cursor's working, this area in here, which created a new access in here away from this crossroads to create a new staggered junction, that piece was in West Suffolk. And understandably, people like Councillor Warboy said, "Oh, should we be allowing more development when this very important highway work may never happen if West Suffolk District Council was to refuse that application?" because with the Peyton Road application, there is a significant package of highway works, very important highway works. Most of these are identified in the neighbourhood plan as being necessary before additional development could even be contemplated in Thurston. But what happened is when West Suffolk District Council considered the highway junction improvements, they deferred it and were minded to refuse. But when it went back to them, Bloor had agreed to provide this extended cycleway all the way from, effectively from Bury, right up to the station. At that point, so on the 3rd of June, West Suffolk District agreed to, or resolved to grant planning permission for those works. So what I can now report is that both councils are working on the 106 and are looking to issue the planning decisions as soon as those 106s have been signed. So I can give you more comfort this time, Councillor Warboys, that that shouldn't be an issue going forward. We've obviously got the issue of phasing around when those works happen, but I will come on to that as we go through. So just to remind you, this is the scheme in red that you saw. We'll just go back quickly. I pressed the wrong button. In red is the Gladman proposal that you looked at in January. You'll notice that in the darker brown biscuit colour, we have two sites adjacent that are already under construction, Linden Homes and Persimmon Homes. The pink coloured area called Lawrence Homes, we understand they also have permission. They are about to start. So the point I made in January is that this site is in large part infill between existing developments that are underway. So what's different? Well, we know that Thurston Parish Council object. They maintain that objection. I'm sure we'll hear from them this morning. But the point that certainly came up last time, and this is something that Councillor Eben was very strong in emphasising and had support from other members, was how confident are we that this site can be adequately buffered, because parts of it are on the edge of the countryside. So on the left you have the January version, on the right you have the September version, and you'll notice straight away that what we have is a new system of green links that crisscross the site north-south, east-west. But the first point I want to draw out is I want to look at this boundary, because I know, Rachel, Councillor Eben, you were very strong in wanting to ensure that the boundary on the east with Meadow Lane was at least 20 metres wide. So what we've done is we've gone away, and I can confirm that they will be 20 metres wide. It will be extended. The existing hedgerow will be extended. We will cover that in terms of a condition. In terms of the proposed access, this is off of Ixworth Road. So on this screen, the red circle with the red arrow is the proposed access, and the access, the blue arrow in the blue circle, is the emergency vehicle access. Now what I need to draw to your attention is the visibility splay. Now remember that this is now turned on its side. North is, on this diagram, is on the left, and there is a 215 metre visibility splay, and that's important when we come to consider the buffers, the landscape buffers. What we're also getting at that new access is a 3 metre wide footway cycleway that will connect to the footway cycleway that is being provided by Persimmon on the other side of the road. So immediately we have started to secure excellent connectivity to the footway cycleway network in Thurston. We now need to look again at other bits of the buffer, and here I want to just drive you from the north to the south towards Thurston along Ixworth Road, and on the left you'll see some arrows that mark where we are on that journey. Members will be familiar with some recent issues we've had in Thurston over the loss of trees associated with the Persimmon development. This video, I think, is speeded up, so it's not necessarily me moving at high speed, it's simply reducing the length of the video. So we have wooded areas left and right. Now you'll notice on the left we've got the blue arrow, so We're now moving, everything on the left is the Gladman site, and you'll notice the new development on the right, that is the Persimmon development. So we've got the field on the left, that's Gladman, a short section of scrubby hedge, open frontage to Gladman's site. Another bit of scrubby hedge with a tree, and then we're coming to the edge of Thurston. Again, still Persimmon on the right. We're gradually coming up to the complicated junction at Ixworth Road, Norton Road, Station Hill. We've got the community college on the right, just starting to appear. We're now deeper into Thurston. We're coming up to the junction. We've got the college on the right, and we're just going to turn right into Norton Road where the school is. And the college is an important hub within the village, and that should stop there. So originally in January, on Ixworth Road with the visibility display, the black dotted line is the visibility display. And what you'll notice is the planting was shown in front of the visibility display in here. Now what that means is any planting there couldn't be higher than 600 millimetres. Understandably, members were concerned that that would mean the development behind would be exposed. And what we wanted to do was try and restore that natural country lane hedgerow feel that's been lost on both sides of the road at that point. So in discussion with Gladman's, what we have done is we have now secured a 20-metre deep buffer. So that's the same as on the eastern side behind that vision display. So as you travel down Ixworth Road in the future, where you might need planning permission and it was implemented, you would actually have a deep planting belt that would restore some of the natural character of Ixworth Road. So here we have that display. We're looking back from the north towards Thurston. The yellow is the vision display, and what we'll effectively have is a hedgerow running all the way down there. I want to point out that since we met in January, Persimmon have almost finished delivering the new footway cycleway on the western side of Ixworth Road, and that's important in terms of connectivity. So I'll just quickly take you along Ixworth Road, and you can see on the left that new footway cycleway. The Gladman site will connect to that via a crossing, and we'll notice on the right how open the Gladman site is at the moment. Very exposed. There is a lot of development on the left on its way. So we've reached the edge of the Gladman site. In terms of existing hedgerow, as I described and as you saw as we went through the video, the bits in red are areas of existing flora that we will be likely to lose. But as you can see, let's go back, there isn't much there in the first place. So what we can say is that the whole of that length, except for where the road goes in, will now be a 20-metre deep landscape buffer. What we're looking to do is create a natural hedgerow containing typical indigenous rural species. So not only will it provide a glorious visual treat, but it also provides wonderful habitat and will increase biodiversity. Again, Councillor Eben and others were very strong on let's create some green corridors. So if we look at the little picture on the top right, this is a slice north-south through the site where we have one of the new green links. So we have this landscaped corridor. We could almost call it as a green link. It is an ecological corridor. It's a network that allows wildlife to move between existing areas of wildlife. But for pedestrians, we've also got these raised tables which make it pedestrian friendly. And the same is true on the west-east link that we've secured through the site. So here you can see the green link, and we've got the pedestrian raised tables as well to improve access. As well as that, members were keen that we should encourage pedestrian and cycle activity in Meadow Lane, and we will have that connection now. And that will be an important corridor for people trying to get to the new primary school, which is also just to the east of Meadow Lane. So again, we're beginning to reinforce the pedestrian and cycle network in Thurston. We also need to look at recreation. We have secured agreement to a financial contribution of £200,000, which will go towards maintenance and equipment within the large area of open space that is being gifted, where you grant permission, for £1 at the northern end of the site. On this slide, you'll see the area. There's this large swathe of open space to the north that runs round down the east and along the southern boundaries. Part of that will be used to provide a car-free fitness wellbeing perimeter track, and the only point where vehicles would come into contact potentially with pedestrians would be at the access. But if we were clever, we'd build some loops into that network, so you could start at this end, you could jog, walk, take your dog all the way around, do a loop and come back, and that would be entirely car-free. On the right, I've listed some of the thoughts that we've had about what should be included, and we're suggesting that the gym trail, for example, be conditioned. We're talking potentially there could be a community orchard. That's the bit that we would like to explore with local people. Skateboarding figures heavily in the Thurston neighbourhood plan. There are many references to it, and it's one of the policy 5 in the neighbourhood plan points to this sort of recreational facility. At the moment, the parish council, so here we have the Gladman site, here we have the community college. At the moment, this area of green land isn't developed. Now, Suffolk County Council are currently proposing a Muga multi-use games area with the yellow dot is. There is discussion with Thurston Parish Council about them having a recreation area where the red dot is. And then potentially the black dot would be additional residential development. My understanding is that potentially a skate park in this area could be problematic in terms of the proximity of these dwellings. The latest advice in terms of proximity of skate parks to dwellings, there should be at least a 40-metre separation. What we're thinking is, if the parish council weren't able to secure the skate park on their preferred site, which is, as I showed previously, this site would actually offer the scope to do that. So where the yellow dots are on this screen, we could actually create, or Thurston could create, the latest thinking in skate park design are things called skate dots. So rather than have one big centre where you have every facility, you spread it out in a linear form that creates a more exciting venue for people to do their skating. So the advantage here is that we have much deeper, we have 81 metres depth at that corner down to 72. So you can see how with this sort of arrangement through here, we could easily achieve 40 metres separation. But also that would fit in with the jogging, it would fit in with everything else. But if Thurston were to proceed with the skate park on the other site, this particular site could be used for all sorts of recreational activity. So on the left, you have the more traditional form of skate park, and on the right, you have the new thinking in terms of skate park design with the skate dots. Connectivity, and again, Councillor Eben was very strong on this, and so was Councillor Hicks. And this slide shows on the left, we have the proposed Suffolk County Council Muga, or Mugger, however you wish to phrase it. Here we have the Gladman site. So in close up, there's the Mugger, there's the corner of the Gladman site. Just go back. So on the right, here we have the footway cycle where that's being provided by Persimmon. And there's also an option to go around here to avoid this this tree. That new link will take us right round that corner to where the Thurston Library sits. In terms of Norton Road, this is the Linden Homes development. We will have all sorts of connections, green connections through here, so that you can come from the Gladman site in this corner, down Meadow Lane, walk through and get to the new primary school. That is the new primary school. In terms of access to the station, here we have Gladman site. It's very, sensitive to the... This is a new crossing that would be provided by Gladman. Another new crossing at the Ixworth Norton Station Hill Junction. Another new crossing provided by Gladman at Heath Road. These two crossings are coming via the Thurston 5 developments. This is the link that Persimmon is providing. We've got existing crossings at these points, and Bloor will be doing improvements to this roundabout. So you're beginning to see how this development would fit into a comprehensive network that is increasingly pedestrian and cycle friendly, and that would get you to the station. What about wider connections? Well, obviously one of the key hubs in the village in terms of pedestrian activity is the community college. That actually sits on National Cycle Network 51. So obviously we are looking to enhance cycle access to the college. So on this plan, what we have started to show, the blue flashing dots are the crossings to be provided by Gladman's. We've already secured speed limit extensions northwards so that vehicle speeds from each of these points will be reduced from, these are now in place. These were much closer to the village. We've got new footway and cycleways in these locations. This is coming from the Hopkins development. Thurston 5 money, sorry, apologies, let's go back, has already provided money for footway improvements, footpath improvements. So in terms of east-west movements through the village, through here, you can see crossing, 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 crossing. New primary school, community college. There is increasingly a safer network for pedestrians and cyclists. So let's look at the Ixworth Road crossing that will be provided by Gladman's. The yellow and red dotted line is Persimmon's footway cycleway, and this would be a connection from Gladman's to link directly into that. That would be a toucan crossing, so it would be available for pedestrians and cyclists. In terms of the Ixworth Norton Station Hill Junction, there you have the library site. This is Ixworth Road disappearing into the distance. The Persimmon footway cycleway comes round that corner in that sort of fashion. Here's a shot of the new footway cycleway being provided by Persimmon on Ixworth Road. Another shot, that's the bit where the path goes around the back of the tree. We're just quickly going to take a bit of videos just so you can see how this complicated, well, this crossroads works, because it is one of the key bits of the network that currently has very little traffic management, and we do need to resolve that. So here we are. We swing around. That little gap over the road is there we are, National Cycleway 51. If we swing back, at that point there, that gap is where lots of pupils come and go into to get to the school from the estate beyond. There is no crossing there at the moment, and there is quite a bit of pedestrian footfall at the start of the school day and at the end of the school day. And why that is significant is, if we look at this next slide, I do slow it down as we go. So this is immediately outside the community college, and where you can see the single pupil, that's where that crossing is into the estate. And what happens, you can see, because there is no There are no pedestrian facilities to get across that road. It can be quite perilous to cross, no criticism of squirrels there, but that video actually contained something like 5 minutes of just bumper to bumper buses leaving the school, and the reverse happens in the morning. So at the moment what you've got is the white dots are the pedestrian links, but there's no safe way of crossing in terms of traffic management measures. So what we're looking at for that is Gladman's have offered 2 zebra crossings, which is a start. So you've got the college over here. There's that little footpath connection through to the estate in here. So what we would have at the moment is proposed zebra crossing. So you can see immediately how that would make it safer for pupils to get through there, particularly when there's a lot of traffic to in and froing on that junction. However, there are the 2 zebras, but what we're looking at is, could we make that even safer? And Suffolk County Council is now looking to introduce for the first time in Suffolk tiger crossings. I don't think I've been able to describe a tiger crossing to you before. So what is a tiger crossing? This is an illustrative drawing of a tiger crossing. So it actually creates 2 separate crossing points for cycle and pedestrian traffic. So what we're looking at is that complicated junction actually now having the tiger crossings, and you can start to see how that, so you've got cycleways, footway. In terms of safer routes to school and encouraging kids to use their bikes, this must be a safer way to get through that junction. And remember, this sits on National Cycleway 51. So what we're actually doing is reinforcing the benefits of cycle travel. And again, something that Councillor Sarah Mansell pointed out last time on Heath Road, here you have what is part of National Cycle Route 51 going through these little railings. So how safe would that be, and where will the crossing be? So let's just take a little short trip through video. Again, I've speeded it up just so you come across Heath Road, through that little chicane. That is incredibly quiet. There's just a few houses served off here. This is the old Norton Road that's effectively been truncated now by that closure that we've just come through. So we can walk and cycle through here quite easily and safely. As soon as we pop through that little bit of opening, we'll just swing around the back of that van. And here we are, delivered to one of the entrances to the community college. You'll notice in the distance another crossing point. So here we're looking at toucans. Again, useful and safer for cyclists as well. And again, it fits into so here is National Cycle Route 51. Here's Heath Road. What we don't necessarily want people to do is go straight across, but we've got this close enough to make that an attractive route. So what about Thurston Station? Now, this is something that Councillor Field was very strong on. If we are suggesting more new development in Thurston, how are we going to get people safely to the station when we know that there are certain issues at the station? So let's just rehearse what they are. First issue is that there isn't a direct link between the platforms, and on this side there isn't a direct link to this platform from the street, which is significantly at the bottom of this embankment. So at the moment there's a thing known as a sack barrow crossing in here. So what happens is, here we are, we want to get across. So what we actually do, we walk across over there, and then we're back up here. Now, obviously, that means you are crossing railway tracks that are in active use. So at the moment, there are safety measures. There are cameras. There's warning klaxons. And there are a red or a green light system for pedestrians to cross. The next issue is the narrowness of the footway under the bridge. So here we have, it's wide enough for one person, so you can walk through there. As part of the Bayton Road development, we've secured improvements to widen that path under the bridge. So effectively, you now can have two people pass together. The other issue that's been pointed out is Thurston has a very small car park. Now, in some ways, if we were to increase the size of that car park, we might actually be encouraging people to travel from the edge of Bury to catch a train from here. But it certainly is an issue that's been raised locally. What we would want to do is encourage people to walk to the station or cycle to the station from within Thurston. Now, you may recall last time I said that parties were working together to try and come up with solutions to those problems. And I can report that about 10 days ago, Mid Suffolk's Cabinet agreed to release £100,000 to fund a feasibility study to deliver a solution to gaining safer access to the platforms that would mean that we could close the Barrow crossing. Now, the idea is that as soon as that feasibility study has been completed and the preferred option is identified, more money would be released, potentially millions of pounds, to enhance safety at the station through SIL. And members will recall that Thurston has taken a lot of development, is taking a lot of development, and that is generating significant SIL funds. They will be reinvested in Thurston to deliver solutions to the station and other things. Bunbury Arms, this was perhaps the biggest issue on the day back in January, and certainly Councillor Field and Councillor Mansell were very strong in demanding that officers demonstrate that there would be capacity at Bunbury Arms to take this additional development. And I think it's fair to say there was a little bit of scepticism as to whether we could actually demonstrate that. So what happened is, after that meeting, additional traffic survey work was undertaken. That survey work was undertaken before the COVID crisis hit. So the figures were not reduced because people weren't travelling. So those figures were then used and fed into the ACOM model. And you'll recall that ACOM are independent traffic consultants working for Suffolk County Council, and up came the modelling work, and we'll look at that. But also, I think members may have thought, how come that without significant changes to the proposed signalisation, how can capacity be created? Well, the answer is twofold. First of all, the mover technology actually provides additional capacity because it more effectively controls traffic flow through that junction at Bunbury Arms. But also nationally, there has been, for the last 5 years, a reduction in trips across the country. So car usage is going down. Well, and we'll exclude the current COVID situation because obviously that's meant there's been a plummeting of trips. But the trend is a reduction in trips. So that even that has added capacity to that junction. So if we look at the national figures, and these are figures that we haven't made them up, and it's not something that Suffolk County Council has produced itself. These are the national figures. These are the latest figures from the government in terms of annual trips. And you'll notice how those trips, petrol cars have been going down, diesel cars have been going down dramatically, all these other trips have been going down. That's important when we're looking at modelling, because obviously we're also predicting travel movements into the future. So the trend is definitely now a reduction in car trips, which is a good thing, but that feeds into the modelling as well as all the other factors. So if we look at some of these movements, and now this is quite complicated, so I'll just draw out the significant pieces of this. But what you'll notice, understandably, is the majority of traffic is east-west along the A143. So in the morning, we are predicting some 478 traffic movements within that hour travelling east, 937 traffic movements travelling west. And at the same time, we've got 234 people attempting to get out of Thurston during that peak hour. In the afternoon, understandably, we get a reverse. We've got nearly over 1,000 vehicles coming back to Thurston in the afternoon, much fewer travelling towards westwards, and fewer trying to get out of Thurston. So everyone's trying to get back to Thurston. And that actually describes all the movements on that junction. But the important point to note is that in the morning, you have 199 vehicles trying to get into Thurston, whether that's from the west, the north, or the east. Understandably, you've got more people trying to get out in all directions. In the afternoon, understandably, that has reversed. More people trying to get back into Thurston than are trying to leave it. And that's important when you look at a situation where currently there are no signals. So that's the junction at the moment. Here's the Bunbury Arms. Here's the road into Thurston. This is the A143. So we're quickly flying around that junction. Strangely, no traffic at that point, but that is the junction. And we'll just let that come to a stop. So here we have a situation in the morning, just to try and explain those models. So we have a lot of traffic, as you recall, going east, a lot of traffic going west. And here we are trying to get out of Thurston. Someone to go left, someone to go right. But because without signals it's so difficult to get across, this queue builds up and up. So it's increasingly frustrating if you are trying to get out of Thurston in the morning. In the afternoon, you've got a lot of traffic still on the A143, but as soon as somebody stops to turn right to get into Thurston, because there's significant traffic coming this way, you start to get tailbacks, and then traffic wanting to go straight on has to start sitting behind the traffic that's waiting to go right. So you start getting queues building up on the A143. Clearly undesirable, but that's the current situation. So in terms of queue lengths, I'm now going to explain with signals. These are the queue lengths with signals. You think, well, hang on a minute, why have we got these long queues here compared to these without signals? But actually, if we add the queue, in the morning, the red is the queue trying to get out of Thurston. And that queue can be 46 cars long. With signalisation, you end up with only 11 in that queue. That's the impact that signalisation has for people in Thurston. Significant benefit. In the afternoon, actually, you manage to secure is potentially that is the length of the queue for people trying to get back into Thurston. Signalisation reduces that queue dramatically, and what it is doing is it's making more efficient decisions around movements. We now have, that we didn't have in January, the junction design, and I can remember, Councillor Field, you said something along the lines of, how on earth are you going to create additional space at that junction? And actually, additional space can be created, road space. So let's zoom into that junction. The dots, black dots, are signals, new traffic signals, and I've started to, in green, show how the lanes would work in the approaches. So you can see approaching from the west, you can have a right turn filter. You've made it clearer for traffic users to get around that junction by demarcating the turning manoeuvring lanes. Then what happens is, so here is in grey, the existing road space. Now the first thing that's going to happen here is, you see that corner is widened to allow people to slip off left far more easily. That is an efficient way of easing capacity at that junction. We also then on this corner can do the same thing, and then on this corner some extra flaring can occur, and then in here there's a build out where the existing crosshatch markings are. That already increases capacity, so the alterations to the junction and the signals produce increased capacity. And as we've explained, the Suffolk County Council are working with ACOM, and that's a quote from their website, just to demonstrate that ACOM are world-renowned engineers and they are independent. So Suffolk have gone out to get that advice to be sure that their own calculation and thinking is robust, and the advice is that yes, it is robust. ACOM have looked at all of that. But I do need to take a little bit of time to run through the County Council's formal consultation response. And I'll do it, so I'll take the first sentence. And the County Council have said, as the Highway Authority, we have examined this application and the supporting information in detail. The additional development will lead to more vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists using the highway network around Thurston, in addition to that from the permitted developments. Next point is, they then say, without mitigation, we consider that the cumulative impacts are severe in highway terms. So let's look at that. Without mitigation, impacts would be severe. In this proposal, we are looking at mitigation. And I explain why that's important in the next sentence. However, with the proposed mitigation, we consider that while some significant negative factors remain, the overall impact, when balanced, the impact is no longer severe, nor is there unacceptable impact on road safety. Now, members may want to understand what do they mean, i.e. the County Council, when they say significant negative factors remain? Well, the answer to that is there will be an estimated 126 vehicles, additional vehicles within and around the village during the AM peak. So what we don't want to do is disguise the fact that there will be added vehicular activity. But what we need to highlight is the fact that there will be additional mitigation for pedestrians and cyclists. And on that basis, the County Council concludes, for these reasons, we advise that we do not recommend that this application is refused. We also need to look at paragraph 109 of the MPPF, which deals with the question of highway impacts. Specifically, and I will read it because it's important we drill down into this, 109 says development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. So if we look at that first bit, unacceptable impact on highway safety, the County Council has said, nor is there an unacceptable impact on road safety. In terms of the second test, cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. The County Council has specifically said impact is no longer severe. And this demonstrates how Bunbury Arms capacity has been improved. So here's the junction without mitigation, and there are two parts of that junction that are over capacity without mitigation. So we've got the A143 on the west side and Thurston Road in Thurston Road in the morning, the A143 West in the afternoon. And I demonstrated that issue of getting out in the morning and coming home to Thurston in the afternoon. But with traffic signals, capacity has been increased so that we no longer are in the overcapacity situation. And virtually in every example here, we're well within the theoretical capacity. So that is a significant increase in capacity with all development loaded onto that junction and with the Gladman proposal. And what this doesn't include is the impact of Mover, the real-time traffic management software. So we need to look at Mover to see what it does. And what Mover does is actually adjusts the green time or the red time of traffic lights at the junction by second understanding how much traffic is using each arm of the junction. And when it detects queues forming, it changes the sequencing of the lights to create the most efficient traffic management system. Generally, 3 ways to deploy Mover. County Council prefer the induction loops in the road, and they are set into the road surface, and they work on magnetic force. They detect the metal of the cars, lorries and vans moving over the top. You can have microwave detectors on top of the signals to detect vehicles in a queue, or you can actually have them button controlled as well. Normally, traffic lights are pre-programmed, so 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, somebody has sat down, a programmer, and worked out what the signal sequence should be. So here we've got, for example, short burst of green, longer burst of red, short burst of green, longer, and that is just programmed, it's fixed. So no matter what the traffic is doing on the day, if it's not following the usual pattern, the lights are stuck with the pre-programmed sequencing. However, what Mover does is the blue elements are the detectors in the road, and they're constantly monitoring traffic. So in this example, the induction loop is saying, hang on a minute, we're detecting a little bit of additional traffic on this arm. If we're going to avoid a queue, what we need to do is have a longer phase of green before we go to red. It does some more detecting, and it's, no, that hasn't done it yet. We've still got this queue forming. Let's give another short red and a longer burst of green. And then it detects that traffic is back to flowing efficiently, and it goes to the, and it's doing that 24 hours a day, changing signals depending on how traffic is using the arms of the junction. And that can increase capacity by up to 13%, on average 13%. But there are some examples where people have achieved much higher improvements. So already I've demonstrated that with signals, that junction has adequate capacity. The Mover element adds another amount of additional capacity. So I think at the previous meeting in January, I think Councillor Mansell was referring to the junction being over capacity. I think we can safely say that at no point during that day will that junction be over capacity with signalisation and Mover. And that's important to understand, because I've demonstrated the benefits for the people of Thurston in terms of getting out of that junction to go to work or school, or if you're leaving in the morning, and when you come back in the evening, afternoon, you have a much easier journey because you're not sitting in a long queue at that junction. We need to think about residential amenity, because obviously there's a lot of building activity going on in Thurston. We have had some issues in Meadow Lane, and you'll recall that this site has access to Meadow Lane, insofar as Linden Homes have been using Meadow Lane temporarily to provide construction access to their site. But the new purpose-built junctions on Norton Road are either nearing completion or have been completed, so they will stop using Meadow Lane. We're confident that were you to grant planning permission for this Gladman development, we would be able to ensure that the developer did not use Meadow Lane as their construction access. So the residents in Meadow Lane should, going forward, have a much less disturbed daily routine from construction traffic. But it's true, there's a lot of construction traffic in Thurston. This would add to it if you granted planning permission, but the County Council is now operating a coordinated management system between all the developers, and I'm sure my colleagues can explain how that is being operated to try and minimise disruption within Thurston. Now, something that came up, and it's not necessarily a material consideration, but I do want to go through it. It's something that Councillor Matheson brought up, and he argued very strongly. I think, Councillor, you were very concerned that additional development in Thurston would put pressure on GP services in Woolpit, Woolpit being the natural destination for patients from Thurston. There isn't a GP in Thurston. So I've quickly put the catchment areas, and as you can see, people in Thurston are expected to go to the GP in Woolpit. That isn't in itself uncommon in rural Suffolk. So you can see, for example, Debenham. People in Debenham, the catchment for Debenham is equally as large, and that's probably true of most rural settlements in Suffolk. However, in terms of access, that's an 8-kilometre distance from Thurston to the Woolpit surgery. But what we have secured, and I'm sure Councillor Geek or Councillor Mansell, if they were, I think Councillor Mansell's not here, unfortunately, would confirm that we're working very closely with them in Woolpit, because we have secured additional land through development to expand healthcare facilities in Woolpit. So, Councillor Matheson, when you were saying how could the Woolpit surgery cope, the answer is we've secured a site that's probably as big, slightly bigger than the existing site, that would allow expansion. So, working with SIL money and the CCG, we can ensure that health facilities for the people of Thurston can keep up with demand. Sustainability. Well, this site here is incredibly close to the college and incredibly close to the new primary school. You couldn't get much closer. So in terms of sustainability, pupils will be easily and safely able to walk to either the community college or the primary school. In terms of the distance to the station, here we are in the middle of the Gladman site. It's 3/5 of a mile walk. That can all be achieved on footways with the new crossings. That is a very convenient and easy walk to and from the station from this site. Here we have cycle route number 51, the national route. And as you can see, it goes right through Thurston. And that's important because Thurston is very cycle conscious. Before the COVID situation, they were organising all kinds of activities. Here we had one promoting join the Thurston cycle loop. There were bike maintenance Saturdays. So Thurston is very switched on to encouraging cycling activity. So let's take a quick cycle along 51, Route 51. Here we are just opposite the community college. We're going to move at 5 times the speed that it was taken in. We're moving southwards along the cycle route. You'll notice the existing crossing. Those cars aren't moving at that speed. Remember that I've speeded the video up. To the left, we have the community centre way down off of there, and New Green, a large open space in the heart of Thurston. We come through, there we are. There's somebody using their scooter. We're on the footway cycleway. We're going right through, no cars. This is entirely car free, except we just have to cross this little, there's the community centre, bit of residential, and over we go. And that takes us right the way through to Threadwester. So on the right, we've got the playground. We're still car free. We're going through there. Community facilities on the left, and then we end up in Threadwester Road. Again, incredibly well used, in nice, safe cycle pedestrian network. And we're back out onto the, and that just shows where we've just cut through past the community cafe, linking Threadwester to Station Hill. In terms of the Norton Road, as part of the Linden Homes development, we've got more cycleway footways. So if you're cycling to school, you can get to the primary school safely. Buses, a large number of bus stops in the village. I think some rural communities would be envious of the bus services that service the village. We've got a railway station that provides access to London and Cambridge, Peterborough, and Norwich. A good timetable of trains. This is the COVID timetable. Facilities in Thurston are numerous. In terms of biodiversity, we're securing packages that, by condition, that, and we're suggesting Section 106 that would include integrated bird nesting boxes into some of the houses, hedgehog-friendly fencing, even bat boxes built into some of the houses on the walls. We're getting new hedgerow habitats, wetland areas through the SUDs. We're going for innovative solutions to SUDs on this site, were you to grant permission. New grassland, meadowland within the open space. In terms of the Section 106, we are getting education contributions totaling £1.45 million. Important, as the population increases, we have to make sure that the local education centres can cope. So you're already getting a new primary school in Thurston, paid for by development. We're getting a large area of open space for £1 that has a value somewhere in the region of £350,000. We're getting the 200,000 contribution towards play and management in the open space. We're also getting, that wasn't on offer back in January and has only happened since the August meeting, is an additional contribution of £31,500, so that residents of the development would have access to a £150 discount on the purchase of a new cycle. And again, that's another step to try and encourage cycle use within the village and to get people to move away from using their cars for local journeys. We're also getting a station contribution of 30,000. That's something that members wanted last time. That has been secured. So depending on how you add those benefits up, it's something in the order of 1.72 million to over £2 million worth of public benefit. But also, what we need to do is just think about the 35% affordable housing that's being delivered. And you can do calculations in all kinds of ways, but the bottom line is to get 35% affordable housing represents a significant public benefit. If the council were to provide those, you might expect it to invest something like 8.8 million to deliver 73 dwellings. This scheme would deliver those, and I might be criticised for the assumptions that I put into those, and that will be fair enough, but it can't be denied that 73 affordable dwellings socially represents a fantastic public benefit when we have so many people on the housing register, and that we need to deliver 127 houses a year, affordable houses a year, up until 2036 in mid Suffolk. all sorts of other benefits that I've listed here in terms of Section 106 that we're securing. One of the biggest things since August is the move towards these tiger crossings, and I'm sure that's something that councillors will want to explore as we go through the debate. We have to accept, yes, there will be cumulative impacts. There will be additional pressure on facilities in the village. We know that the new primary school is coming. We know that SIL money will fund or potentially fund additional GP expansion. The parish council will be entitled to 25% of SIL receipts because of the adopted neighbourhood plan. We do know that there will be additional traffic movements, but we think the impact will be mitigated by the enhanced package of improvements. We know that there will be additional construction traffic and that will have to be managed. We know that potentially more people living in Thurston will mean better use of the station. We're already dealing and spending money on resolving platform improvement issues, and there will be an additional loss of farmland. The scheme is still liable. On the basis of all of that, we are continuing to recommend that planning permission be granted, subject to the prior completion of a Section 106 agreement. And on that note, Chair, I hand back to you for the next stages of the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive overview of the application. Members, only so far we've heard from Vincent, and I admitted in the start, due to my technology problems, I'd just like to remind everyone present this meeting is being broadcast live, so anyone that comes on to speak following Vincent and is live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole meeting is also being recorded, except where obviously there are confidential or exempt items. So if you make any representations to this meeting, you'll be deemed by the council to have consented to being recorded. And by entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. And I think just for the benefit of members and the members of the public, it's important just to note that we have Ian Deprez with us today, who's our legal advisor. We have Claire Philpott, the government officer. We have Philip Isbell, who's the chief planning officer. Vincent, who we've heard from, Vincent Pearce, the case officer. Sam Harvey has joined us today, senior development management engineer from Suffolk County Council on the highways, and we have obviously the ward members who we'll hear from later. Okay, so we've had a lot of information there, and also we've also had the late papers members as well. So happy to open it up now just for points of clarity around what we've heard so far. And if you put your hand up, I'll bring you in the order that your hand goes up. So just to remind you, this isn't debate, it's just points of clarity around what's been presented. First up is Councillor Field, and if you could turn your camera on when you speak, please, that'd be great.
Thank you. Welcome the detail about the Bunbury Arms junction. That's now much clearer. But just one question really on that area. You've obviously done traffic simulations and you've derived queue lengths, but you're telling us that the software that does that calculation is not clever enough to look at the mover technology and make predictions with that actually in place. Therefore, we're sort of guessing at the improvement that may produce. Have I got that right, or am I misunderstanding?
I would suggest, Councillor Field, that we're not guessing. We know that signals that don't have the mover technology will deliver significant benefits in themselves. But what we do know is that once you install the mover system, the management technique is far more sophisticated because it's reading traffic in real time and changing the lights in response. We're not guessing that will have a significant improvement. It will have an improvement. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that signalisation in itself has enormous benefits, and with mover, the benefits for the people of Thurston in terms of getting in and out of the village are significant. But the point that came out in January was, is there or is there not sufficient capacity at that junction? And the answer is there is capacity at that junction with signalisation to accommodate the Gladman development, and with mover technology we've even bought further capacity. And that was the significance of that table that had the green blocks in it. When we looked before, there were some red blocks, and that was a point that you were keen to understand previously, Councillor. So no, we're not guessing. This is state-of-the-art understanding of that technology and of the benefits of signalisation. I'm sure my county colleagues could give you a much more scientific response. But that might be a matter for debate. I'll leave that for the chair.
We'll leave it to debate, but I say it's sort of like a stochastic update that you do to the traffic lights timing, and I was just seeking, is there a simulated answer for that or an estimated answer? Okay, there's an estimated answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three questions. You made talked at great length about the number of traffic arisings at certain junctions, and you were using a calculation from government about how traffic numbers had been dropping. I take it you've used that in the calculations of these junctions, but surely that's wrong to use that statistic, because that statistic is including cities where there has been a significant drop in car transport. So could I be asked if the modelling you used is a national one including cities, or is it a Suffolk one specific to this junctions and the traffic horizons we have in Suffolk? When you were mentioning the affordable housing, you used the word it would be socially beneficial. So can I confirm whether these are at social rent or affordable rent, which is the usual? You also, could I ask why we didn't, when we were looking at the health provision, why we didn't look at the provision in the Bacton area, because lots of residents in Bacton use wall-pit surgery, even more now because Bacton surgery is actually closed. So I'm struggling to see why that wasn't factored in. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, over to you, Vincent.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do it in a different order, if I may. The 35% affordable would be expected to comply with our normal requirement, which is the majority of those would have to be affordable rented accommodation. So we're currently working on a 75-25 split. So the majority is affordable rented. In terms of pressure on healthcare facilities in Bacton, the point I'm making is that by securing the land in Woolpit, we are building in capacity to expand the Woolpit surgery to accommodate future demand. Now, whether or not considerations of Bacton is relevant to an application in Thurston, perhaps not. But the answer to your point is that we have already secured that land. We are already thinking ahead about ensuring that there is adequate GP facilities for people in that catchment. In terms of the modelling, I think I would have to defer to my county colleagues to deal with the very specific point you raised, Councillor Stringer, around the assumptions within that modelling in terms of Suffolk movements or national movements in terms of the downturn in trips. So at that point, I would have to ask Sam for advice. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I come back on the health one?
Let's. Should we finish off the answer them all? Then we'll see if you want to come back on all three.
Okay. Thank you.
Sam, do you just want to come in on that point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The growth is to Suffolk. What happened was that the transport consultant looked at the growth that was predicted for 2020 from the 2017 surveys and the transport assessments, and the growth was less than the actual measured survey for the March surveys.
Andrew, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I think that clarifies the question that we have aggregated the national model. I want to come back on the health issue. You fundamentally misunderstood the question. Already people from Bacton use woolpit surgery. Already people from Elmswell use woolpit surgery. Missed out from the presentation. There's significant growth in both these villages, and coupled with that, the current Bacton surgery is closed. That's why I was surprised that you saying that we've thought about growth in health need, when in fact there's a huge pent-up need that already, so the expansion could be already taken care of by the numbers from pressure elsewhere.
May I come back, Chair? Ooh.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, please do.
Understand the point you're making, Councillor Stringer, but as the planning authority, we have minimum impact on healthcare provision, because as you know, that's a matter for the NHS and the CCG. But what we have done is, I think, remarkably forward thinking, in that in Woolpit, as part of an application on the residential development, we have secured additional land to enable the health provider to expand provision. Obviously, if we hadn't have secured that land, they would have been restricted to their existing site. So I think we have gone a tremendous way further forward than perhaps a number of planning authorities would do in making sure we have the land for expansion. It's now up to the NHS and the CCG to ensure that that valuable asset is best used to expand facilities. We're even using SIL money, so they can even make a bid against the SIL pot to make that possible. So I'm sure that you will be making very strong representation to the CCG that they do dip into our SIL fund and they do take advantage of that new area of land to expand facilities, not just for Thurston, but for your own people in Bacton. That's something that I'm sure you'll get behind and rally the troops with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up is Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, can I just, before I ask my questions, can I just make a couple of clarifications? That I understood Councillor Turner had made apologies, but that wasn't at the beginning of the meeting. And also, Blore Homes has been mentioned several times, and while this isn't a Blore Homes application, my brother Robert Eburn works for Blore Homes, so I just wanted to make that
thank you. Yeah,
clear
and I have had an email from Turner with something to read out on her behalf
for full transparency. But thank you, Vincent, for a very comprehensive presentation. I've got three questions, if I may. Firstly, with regards to Ixworth Road, there have been a lot of issues with regards to the trees along that road, and I just wanted to ask, it's mentioned in S9.4, if that has been resolved. Secondly, I understand about the station feasibility study, but could you give us some dates on that as to when that would report back, and then secondly, when it'd be likely that any actions from that would be implemented? And thirdly, if I may, the timings as well for signalisation and the mover installation at the Bunbury Arms Junction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Eburn. In terms of Ixworth Road, we are now actively looking with the County Council at a solution that takes that footway cycleway behind the biggest tree, the most important tree. So we are confident now that that tree is not threatened. In terms of our approach to when will signalisation at the Bunbury Arms happen, that's a matter for the County Council insofar as the money that has been secured from the Thurston 5 developments is growing all the time, and we'll ask Sam for an indication as to when that might happen. But the idea would be that were you to grant planning permission for this development, the developer would provide the funding for mover, and the mover would be installed at the same time as the signalisation. But the signalisation work is now down to Suffolk County Council, so we'll ask Sam for an update. In terms of the timing for the feasibility work at the station, I haven't got the exact dates, but I know that all parties are working to try and come up with something quickly, because there was a previous feasibility study. So this is a question of taking the findings from that and working up some fresh ideas. But in terms of the actual dates, I can't give you a date at this stage, Councillor, because I don't have that information. But I know that all the parties are working together to come up with a solution that is quick. Something in my head is thinking December. I'm sure Christine suggested December might be the date where we're looking to get answers to those questions, and then there would be a bid in the new year for funding from the SIL pot via Cabinet. But that is something I'd have to double check on to give you an absolute definitive answer. So apologies that I haven't got the exact answer, but that's my understanding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I just think the dates are important with regards to when this development might commence.
Perhaps my colleagues behind the scenes can be asking those questions whilst I deal with the rest, if I can send a sort of secret coded message to them if they're listening.
I think we've heard that loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, and next up is Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Coming back to the health question, and thank you for pointing out the progress at Woolpit. However, I wanted to ask if anybody has had any recent discussions with the CCG part of the NHS, because I notice on page 142 that they were discussing the capacity constraints at the two nearest surgeries, which were of course the ones in Bury, Mount Farm, and the one at Ixworth. And so it does really raise some doubts in my mind as to whether the right amount of planning is going on the NHS side of things. These matters are concerns across the part of the districts that we're talking about and that I know and that I represent. So just have you had a recent discussion with them to see that they are actually properly addressing capacity at all these relevant surgeries?
Okay, thank you. Vincent.
As a development management officer, I wouldn't be having those discussions, but I do know that those discussions happen routinely between our policy team and our communities team. Now, the issue I think for us as a planning authority and you as members of the Referrals Planning Committee is, strictly speaking, those are points that have to be dealt with by the Health Authority and the CCG. We have done as much as we can in terms of securing additional land. We also have said to West Suffolk District Council and the CCGs, you are able to bid against our SIL pot if you need to enhance GP services in your areas to cater for people from our district. You can make a bid against our SIL pot, and if it's legitimate, we can make that money available to you. And that's the benefit of us being a SIL authority, whereas our neighbours aren't. In truth, they can be bidding against our pot, and we can share our pot with them if it helps our own communities. But it is something, as I said to Councillor Stringer, Councillor Matheson, I'm sure you will be pressing hard. You'll be using all your influence to perhaps even have a discussion, perhaps between you. You might actually want to have a discussion, set up a meeting with the CCG and start to explore these issues directly with them. We're always happy to join you on those, but if it's a question of lobbying them, then more power to your elbow, and we'll do what we can to help you.
Thank you. Philip, did you want to come in on this point, or just after all the members have had questions?
Chairman, bearing in mind that Vince was asking for some contributions from behind the scenes, I can add a little bit more to his answer around the railway station and the feasibility study there. To understand from Christine Thurlow that the expectation there is that the study will start around September and finish and report back in March of 2021. And whilst I'm on, I also was listening to Councillor Matheson asking about GP capacity. I'm aware that West Suffolk dealt with an application fairly recently to expand the surgery in Stanton. And indeed, I believe there is county council discussions going on with West Suffolk about that Stanton surgery and its potential to expand provision in that area, which obviously might well add to capacity to support the wider health authority needs in this locality. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up is Councillor Guthrie.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I think some of it has been sort of questioned, but anyway, I'll just move on to it. Regarding the Bunbury Arms, should this application not be approved, presumably we lose the 30,000 obviously from this application, and does that also mean that the funding for Mover is dropped off the pot as well, please? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We have no other questions at this point. Now, I always think it's important to try and have a break about every 90 minutes. And I think actually now would be a good time to have a quick 10-minute break so that people can quickly stretch their legs. We'll come back at 11:10, which is only 9 minutes actually. And then we will start with the public speakers. And after the public speakers, obviously, then go into debate. So can I just remind everyone, please, not to discuss the application during the quick mini break. Literally, we want to start very promptly at 11:10. So we'll just suspend the meeting for 9 minutes so people can have a quick stretch. Thank you. And have a comfort break. Thank you. hopefully coming back so promptly. Just before we continue, where we open it up for public speakers, we just need to everyone is back before we go into that next session. Claire, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor James Caston.
Present.
Councillor Rachel Eburn.
Present.
Councillor John Field.
Present.
Councillor Peter Gould.
Present.
Councillor Kathy Guthrie.
Present.
Councillor Lavinia Haddingham.
Present.
Councillor Matthew Hicks.
Present.
Councillor John Matheson.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Mellon.
Present.
Councillor Richard Mayer.
Present.
Councillor Dave Muller.
Present.
Councillor Mike Norris.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Stringer.
Present.
And Councillor Roland Warboys.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to public speakers, and we now like to ask the Parish Council representative, Derek Haley, to speak. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and if you could turn your camera on, please.
I think it is on, actually, Matthew. Right, I'll start. The councillors will be aware that the Parish Council, through its legal team, contend that the committee members were significantly misled by planning officers at the Planning Referrals Committee meeting on the 29th of January in their advice given to them on the relative weight to be accorded to the made Thurston Neighbourhood Plan on the 25th of October, compared with the unexamined, let alone adopted Consultation drove local plan. Your officers have still conveniently chosen to hone in on use their own interpretation of the word focus, thereby giving them the reason for recommending further growth in Thurston, with scant regards to the impact that this will have on the village as a whole, and with no regards to all the wording contained within the Thurston NDP, and as yet to be adopted by your council. This interpretation is to be subject to judicial review for both applications submitted at planning meeting, but the Parish Council recommends that this application should be refused as being contrary to the policy contained with Thurston NDP, and particularly Policy 1, Thurston Peaceful Strategy, and the made NDP. Further, the lack of consideration of traffic impacts from sites T1 to TA up to 2024 of the Crossroads junction of Pakenham-Eastworth Road, located in Pakenham. We're not convinced of the technology of untried and unproved mover. Why has the modelling not been extended to include school collection hours, given that one of the key considerations for Thurston being a key service centre is its community college, which is currently split over 2 sites and generates a significant amount of traffic outside of those peak hours. The impact of the increased growth of a narrow rural road, and I stress rural road, that will be significantly impacted by not only the Persimmon development opposite, but also the application by Suffolk County Council for a community school artificial pitch, car parking to the rear of the college. Approval of this application at this point in the village will result in daily vehicle joins in excess of 6,000 along this road. Why has there been, you have updated about the seal, so my apologies. The latest traffic assessments have underestimated the effects on the Bunbury Arms, given the assessment was made in early March. And PC has concerned over the accuracy of such data. Climate change. The proposal demonstrates no measures to discourage the use of cars for residents to travel to work, the use of vehicles to access employment outside of the village, as this proposal fails to offer any employment opportunities, will increase congestion and carbon emissions. Should this application be approved, the Parish Council questions MSDC's the desire to respond positively to the climate change challenge and to engage effectively and coherently with the NDP. I would also like to stress that if in respect of the neighbourhood plan, if you accept these recommendations, then I have to understand what your take is on neighbourhood plans. You seem to abandon neighbourhood plans at your will when it's convenient. And it's amazing how all this money has suddenly appeared out of the blue before, from August to now. And so we will question why some of this is there. And still, as we yes, Matthew.
Sorry, I was just thanking you because I thought you had just finished.
Sorry, Matthew. I had to switch page just in case I missed something.
Okay.
No,
thank you.
Well, no, I mean, it's the railway question.
The 3 minutes are up.
All right.
So,
okay.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any questions for the parish council? If you'd like to have any questions, if you put your hand up. Councillor Stringer first.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. If this were approved today, what would you think the impact of that approval would have on the made neighbourhood plan?
I think it would have a big impact, because we would say to ourselves, well, why are we making neighbourhood plans when they are blatantly being pushed aside at convenient to developers?
Okay. Next up is Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this is a question for an officer, really, but it's arisen from what Derek Haley has just said to the committee, is just the significance of the neighbourhood plan with regards to this application. I know the presentation from the officers focused on the addition from the previous committee of the highways improvements and so forth, but could the officer, and I can see Philip Isbell's just put up his hand, just give us a firm kind of confirmation, as it were, of the relationship of this site to Thurston's neighbourhood plan and our draft emerging plan, which is still draft and still emerging. Thank you very much.
Did you want to come in on that point?
Yes, if I may, Chairman. Thank you. Yes, and to try and simplify and explain, the Made Thurston neighbourhood plan is part of your development plan. So in law, in essence, decisions should be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So you have a planning policy in the neighbourhood plan, and I'm just trying to locate it on my screen, although I seem to have closed it down. So 2 seconds. The policy 1 of that plan talks about focusing growth in Thurston. Forgive me, I did have it up 2 seconds ago and I managed to have closed it. It talks about focusing growth in Thurston, and it talks about the district council being the authority to effectively identify the strategic direction for housing growth, and that in essence puts things back to us. That comes up in paragraph 4.2 of the neighbourhood plan. So effectively we have a measure of inconsistency, I suppose, in approach, but the Thurston neighbourhood plan recognises that the district has a role to plan strategically for housing, and obviously we understand the limited weight that we can attach to the JLP in its present format, but clearly it represents a direction of travel that the council as a whole has agreed. And so you are in the territory of how you weigh the material considerations here. So this is a question of considerable importance. The starting point is that on the face of it, the neighbourhood plan is the development part of the development plan and is recently made. However, that is not the end of that conversation, because policy 1 in that plan specifically uses the word focus. Focus is not an exclusive term. There is separately a policy on development outside settlement boundaries, but there is also a recognition within the plan that the district has a role in planning strategically for housing, and that Thurston should play its part in that. So both of those things come together, and in essence, you have a plan which acknowledges the district has a duty to deal with things on a strategic level. The tension and conflict is inevitably why we are here at committee, because on the face of it, you could quite justifiably say this is a challenge to the approach the neighbourhood plan would expect to take. But from our point of view, we don't apprehend the neighbourhood plan to be at odds with the strategic direction of the district, and the strategic direction of the district is and needs to accommodate housing for its identified housing need. And so to that extent, we are in the territory of weighing up material considerations against that neighbourhood plan. Without reference to the document, Chairman, I'll need to get up in 2 seconds. That's probably as far as I can take you just for the moment.
Okay.
Chair, may I just come back, because
yes,
I found, sorry, I've been trying to look in the previous pages, that there's a point that says all new development in Thurston Parish shall be focused within the settlement boundary. But my understanding is saying that if it's a strategic need of the district, that effectively outweighs the neighbourhood plans allocations.
If I can come back on that, Chairman. So the word focused within policy 1A is important, and I think this is not a question of this is about judgment. This is what this committee must identify and weigh up. The district has a responsibility, and its plans are not up to date and consistent with the NPPF. So the district is in a position regarding its approach to addressing its housing need. The parish council's plan recognises that the village should play its part in contributing to housing need across the district, and will need to play that, and that's described within paragraph 4.2 of the neighbourhood plan, and then uses the language of focus. Now, it is true to say that further policy within the neighbourhood plan talks about development outside settlement boundaries as presently identified being for specific purposes, but you are in the core of a tension between differing policy elements here and material considerations. And my advice to committee is that the housing need that we have across the district, the status of the council's direction of travel, albeit of limited weight in the format of the JLP, are persuasive elements to place greater weight on that, notwithstanding the provision that you have within policy 1, which arguably does not of itself preclude development outside the settlement boundary if that is appropriate, and accepting that the policy within Thurston's neighbourhood plan does describe limited exceptions. We are in the territory very much, as I say, of significance of material considerations and the weight that members attach to them in this committee meeting.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Okay, we did have another hand up, but it's gone down. So at the moment, we don't have any more questions for the parish council. So thank you very much, Derek, for joining us. We don't have an objector or a supporter, as my understanding. Is that still the case, please, Claire?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on to the agent and the applicant. So again, please, if you turn your camera on.
Hopefully you can hear and see me now.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And again, if you can keep to 3 minutes, please.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning, members. My name is Stuart Carville. I'm a planning manager at Gladman Developments. Following the committee in January, you asked us to look at a number of matters which Mr. Pearce has set out for you. We responded to your concerns around landscaping and the linkages through the site. Principally, however, we reviewed the Bunbury Arms junction to provide additional information and modelling in order to demonstrate how the junction would work with movements arising from this proposal, as well as all the other developments in Thurston already permitted. In response to a question asked of the officer earlier, the growth is predicted based upon local data, including existing travel to work patterns and not natural trends discussed. This is locally adjusted to the ward level, and we use a rural growth factor in generating the vehicle movements, i.e. not an urban one or somewhere such as London. The scheme is expected to generate approximately 14 vehicles through the Bunbury Arms junction in the AM peak and 11 in the PM peak. We've shown with the signalisation at Bunbury Arms junctions there will be capacity, including the scheme. We are, however, offering to provide demand-responsive mover for a benefit of all users of the Bunbury Arms junctions in a demand-responsive system. And as Councillor Eburn pointed out, or Councillor Guthrie, sorry, pointed out that this won't be delivered without the funding from this scheme. This application is to provide a significant range of measures to help promote, encourage and enable sustainable transport within the village, including new tabletop carving, zebra or tiger crossings and toucan crossings, cycle vouchers for new residents, cycle links across the site, on-plot in-dwelling facilities for cycles, electric vehicle charging points, as well as contributions to a community car club in the village. The site is in accordance with the emerging local plan's requirements, and it is compliant with all the policies in the Thurston neighbourhood plan, as the members resolved when considering the Baiton Road scheme, which had the same site status as this one. It will deliver community infrastructure of the neighbourhood plan that no other application has done to date, through extensive play areas, community growing spaces, as well as the 74 affordable dwellings for real people in a real need of a home who might not have one. Gladman is committed to providing all these facilities and benefits for all those who live and visit in Thurston already, complementing what has already been approved in terms of sustainability, in providing a comprehensive package for the whole village. There is evidence now that there is capacity in the highway network for vehicles to be absorbed, and we will provide the safety and sustainability package set out. Therefore, the scheme is compliant with the development plan. There is no severe highways impact, and we are providing significant safety improvements across the whole village. And therefore, I'd respectfully request that you grant permission on the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicant and agent. First of all, Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yes, you've said that the mover technology would only be delivered with this development, and in fact Mr. Pearce did also say that earlier to a question, but surely there are developments in West Suffolk, the other side of the boundary, and indeed the Bunbury Arms itself must surely be in West Suffolk. Is it not perfectly possible that some other development which is generating traffic for this junction could also say, oh well, if you're going to put the traffic lights in there, that would be a useful addition in our section 106 claim on our application that's coming to us in Great Barton?
Well, there is no other offer, as I understand it, to provide it. In providing it through the scheme, when the scheme is built out, there's an opportunity to provide it now, or when the scheme starts to come forward. And what that would mean is that it can be installed at the first signalisation stage. So if the signals are installed as a standard four-way crossing, and then mover is funded at a later date, but there is no evidence of where that funding is going to come from without this site, it would require the road to be dug up again and cause significant disruption for a second time. I affected a second installation of the lights. So by providing it now through this scheme, it's a benefit to the scheme, and everybody uses that junction on a daily basis.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer.
Just wanted a point of clarity. You mentioned about the affordable homes, that it would provide homes for those that don't have them. I would like to remind you that we sit here at the moment, Mid Suffolk has no one without a home at the moment, and we haven't since the outbreak of COVID-19.
I'm not quite sure there was a question there. It is questions at the moment, but we'll take that. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. We now move over to the ward members, and we have two ward members. Now, Councillor Richardson, would you like to go first or second? Because the other one is a red report.
I'm happy to go first, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Over to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chair. I think I'll just first start by saying that I do recognise that there's been an awful lot of work that's gone into this application since it last came before the Planning Committee in January. So I would like to thank planning officers for that. It seems that there's an awful lot of input that's been received, particularly with regards to landscaping, biodiversity, cycling, the new tiger crossings. So I do recognise that, and I think we should thank planning officers for the amount of thought that they've put into this. Notwithstanding what I've just said, though, that I do, as the ward member, object to this application and do ask that the referrals committee refuse planning permission in this instance. I've got a few points that I'll touch upon, and broadly they cover the reasons why the referrals committee was minded to refuse in the first instance back in January. First, as I think we've already touched upon, there is that conflict between this application and what's in Thurston's neighbourhood development plan. I do accept absolutely that Thurston is a key service centre, no doubt about that, and we are expected to accommodate development, and I think we can say that we have. But what I will just touch upon, though, is this precise policy conflict, because I do also accept that policy 1A does use the word focus, and the focus is not an exclusionary term. But I would just point out that the context of that is then expanded and elaborated on in policy 1D, which says that planning out or developments outside of the settlement boundary will need to demonstrate that no available and deliverable sites exist within the settlement boundary. So I think that's quite an important context when considering what it says in 1A around the focus, because I don't think there has been any assessment or any evidence provided that there are no available and deliverable sites within the boundary, which is where that focus should be. So that, I think, is an important context to remember when considering the weight, and I say it is a question of judgment, the weight that you do give the neighbourhood development plan. Given that that is a recently adopted and full plan, I would ask you to give weight to that. Another aspect of what was discussed previously was the potential railway improvements and lack of clarity about that. And yes, it's absolutely true that the feasibility study went before Cabinet last week, and we granted still funding for that feasibility study. But I would just emphasise it is exactly that. It's a feasibility study. We don't yet know the outcome of that study. We don't know what the design of those improvements will look like. We don't even know if those improvements can be delivered. One point in particular I'd like to just flag to your attention is the fact that there's still a lack of clarity over who owns the land below the train station platform. So we don't even know whether we would have the consent of the owner in delivering those improvements and linking that southern platform with Bayton Road. In addition, there's also this question around highways. So in the first iteration of the report, obviously, there was this debate over the severity of the impact. And the updated report says that there are still negative impacts in the form of increased traffic, and that the mover modelling will just be an estimation of the benefits. And I think it's important to consider that. There's something else I'd like to just draw your attention to, which is a recent appeal decision that happened within my ward in the village of Norton in the Hawes Lane application. This was another site, much smaller than this one, admittedly, but where the main debate was around a question of the severity of the impact on highways. Now, the local highways authority in Suffolk County Council and officers recommended that we approve that planning application because there was no severe impact on highways. The committee disagreed with that. They rejected it on highways grounds. That then went to appeal, but the planning inspector disagreed with the assessment of the local highways authority. He thought that there was severe impact on highways. So what I would say is that, and the inspector actually made this clear in his conclusion, that it is not, the committee is not obliged to accept assessments from highways authorities. They can disagree with them if they think, in their judgment, the impact is severe. And given the cumulative impact of all the developments in Thurston, I would argue that there should be given weight to what exact negative impacts this additional development will have, and whether or not that can be mitigated by what is, in effect, an estimation of benefit. And lastly, there is just one other point I'd like to emphasise, which is the impact on residential amenity, because this has been sort of raised briefly, but I think we should give it more consideration than has been thus far. Because from what we've experienced already in Thurston with a couple of the sites under construction, we've already had significant impacts on the roads within Thurston. Particularly, we've talked about Meadow Lane, but also this Oak Lane, Barrels Road as well. All of that is, as I say, just the impact from a couple of sites under development. So when you consider the cumulative impact of all of those other settlements under construction, other developments under construction, I think the impact will be severe as well, and will have a detrimental impact on residential amenity. And so, just to conclude, based on all of those reasons, cumulative reasons, I would urge the planning committee to refuse this development going forward. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Councillor Guthrie, you have a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting my buttons muddled up. You mentioned 1D regarding the neighbourhood plan, saying that there were no available deliverable sites that exist. Does Thurston have such a site that could take the capacity that's being offered, which would give the benefits to the community?
So the way it's phrased in policy 1D is that there would need to be a demonstration that there were sites in Thurston that could accommodate it. So
can I cut across you? Are there such
Yes.
sites that would give this capacity?
I don't know, not a single one, I don't imagine, but that would be that's what the assumption of the policy is, that there would need to be the applicant demonstrating that this application should go ahead outside of the settlement boundary because they have demonstrated that they can't deliver it within the settlement boundary.
So the answer to my question is no. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the ward member? No? Okay, thank you very much. The other ward member is Councillor Wendy Turner, who, as we know, is unable to be here today, and she has sent a piece through for me to read out, a report through for me to read out. Application DC 19-02090. As I'm not able to attend this committee meeting, I'd like to submit this letter in opposition to the planning application cited above. I would also like to request that a site visit, which includes site visits to the various junctions that will be impacted as stated in the revised application, is carried out as the highways are integral to this application. Please do accept my apologies for my absence. I am writing in support of Thurston Parish Council and their objection to the proposed planning application. The proposed development planned is a further 200 houses on a road that is already under great stress from Persimmon development on the opposite side. Currently, there are only a handful of houses on this section of road, but when all the developments are complete, there will be a minimum of 450 houses, at least 1,200 more people with the associated number of vehicles. Each vehicle is estimated to have 5 journeys per day. 1,200 times 5 equals 6,000 vehicle journeys along that road. The Ixworth Road is narrow, winding country road, not designed for 450 houses and related vehicles. As stated by Pakenham PC, the Ixworth Road is the main route for children going to the primary school and upper schools from Pakenham, but equally significantly, it is now a cut-through for traffic coming from the A143 trying to avoid the Bunbury Arms crossroads. Combined with SCC's decision to stop funding bus passes for out-of-catchment children, there is predicted to be a further 600 cars entering the village each day, taking and collecting children to and from school. For an ecological standpoint, and bearing in mind the recent protests and objections by local residents and environmental activists to the removal of an old oak tree, it is worth noting that the proposed removal of scrub and a short section of an established hedgerow, as noted in the Planning Committee referral papers, page 212 S9.11, is more valuable than implied. There is current research that has found scrub to be an extremely important habitat for the development of saplings. Thurston has an adopted neighbourhood development plan that was shown to hold weight in a recent planning committee when an application for a proposed application for a house outside the settlement boundary was refused unanimously, bar one abstention, as policy 1 of the document clearly states that all new development in Thurston Parish shall be focused within the settlement boundary. This outcome clearly shows that Thurston's neighbourhood development plan must be given appropriate weight in this case. During the time of a declared climate and biodiversity emergency, and even more immediately a pandemic, I feel we need to pause while we take stock of increased housing density and its likely impact on the current and future residents of Thurston and its neighbouring villages. There are already 5 major developments approved, leading to 1,200 more houses. I'm not advocating the blocking of development and am aware that Thurston is a core village, but the physical impact of having all these developments happening together is detrimental to the current residents' well-being. Thank you for your time, and I urge you to refuse this application. Councillor Wendy Turner, Thurston Ward. Okay, members. So that's all the information that's been presented to us. What I propose to do is just to run through maybe if each person wants to speak, maybe we could go through it in an order, or if we can do it by hands. I'm very relaxed each way. What I would say is if each person just speaks once, maybe if we just run through alphabetically so that everyone comes in and can give their comments and do it that way. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for me to know if people have come in more than once. So if everyone's happy, I'll just do it alphabetically. And then maybe next time, if we do it again, maybe I'll do it reverse. So, Councillor Caston, do you want to start off as we're now into debate?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I can see a lot of positive things in this application. The MOVA, which modelling looks like it can help the congestion on the junction there. The tiger crossings make the junction a lot safer for you generally get distracted young people in that area. It's a lot clearer for the drivers coming the other way. The railway path is an improvement as well. The site is 10 dwellings per acre roughly, which I think is a good density. It's got a large green space area. I like the 20-metre buffer on the roadside, and I like the green links as well, and also the orbital footpath. But we do have some pretty big issues here. The settlement boundary that Councillor Richardson makes a very good argument that the developer has not demonstrated that this housing need can be provided for within that settlement boundary. It's a really difficult thing to actually do unless you have control over that land, because if it's a question of whether that land is available or not, or whether it exists or not. But I think that that is a good argument. It's allocated in the draft local plan, but obviously this is in conflict with the Thurston neighbourhood plan. The big question here is, does the Thurston neighbourhood plan deliver the housing needs of a key service centre like Thurston? I think that's what we need to get to the bottom of in this debate. There's also issues on the cumulative increase in this village and what that does to the road system. But I look forward to hearing how other councillors feel about that and other issues they bring to our attention.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn, would you like to come in at this point?
Thank you very much, Chair. I was hoping we were going to do this by hands, but maybe we can do that next time. Firstly, I think on this application, we've seen the significant changes that have happened since it was last presented to us. And I thank officers for working to do that. But that does really show what happens when we question it as councillors, when we question, what is this development bringing to a community? And I wish we didn't have to do so many questions. I wish applicants would actually come forward with applications that have got the type of things that have been improved upon on this particular site. However, I've interestingly, when I first read these papers, I was thinking, it's so much better. Perhaps it's a straightforward case now. But as I've listened through the debate, I'm more sitting on not the debate, but the questions and presentation. I'm actually more on the fence than I was before. Particularly coming back to infrastructure delivery. It seems that we have to prove housing delivery, but not infrastructure delivery. And I'm very concerned that even still in the recommendations, we've got things like there's a plan that will come forward that will say about highway works and so on. And there's nothing with definite timings on it. And again, we tend to seem to get a lot of housing, but the infrastructure comes at a later date. So I'm really concerned that this isn't really very definite on the delivery of infrastructure. And I've particularly got concerns about the neighbourhood plan. I just wish the Minister for Housing, Robert Jenrick, would actually come forward and actually really stand up for neighbourhood plans, because this is not in the neighbourhood plan. The Cabinet at Mid Suffolk agreed this neighbourhood plan, and we should be standing by it. But that said, it doesn't seem that we're ever presented by planning officers with that as an option. And just, on housing delivery, Thurston's neighbourhood plan, as well as the developments that are currently there, is providing huge amounts of numbers of housing for Thurston. And we do have a significant amount of planning permissions in Mid Suffolk. I think the consultation on the housing 5-year land supply said even taking 1,000 permissions out of it, we've got 7.67 years worth of housing in Mid Suffolk. So what kind of consideration do we give that within this discussion? But I think overall, Chair, my points, I'm pleased to see the amendments that have been made to this application, but I am still remain concerned that it's not compliant with the neighbourhood plan, and that it's still not really clear about infrastructure delivery, particularly the highways ones, and when any work might ever happen at the railway station. So I will listen to my colleagues and make my mind up in due course. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Field, would you like to go next?
Yes. I think I too am in a position where one would really like to support the neighbourhood plan. We persuade communities to produce those because we, and I guess even the government, believes that local people should have a substantial influence on development in their area. However, I do find that plan at the moment does not support the latest numbers that we have to deliver, the required housing delivery. And when I say that, actually, it's the last iteration of that it doesn't meet, let alone the one that's on the blocks now. So if we stick to the neighbourhood plan, we have a substantial problem with lack of housing delivery, in my view. We're told the neighbourhood plan points to other sites within the development boundary of Thurston, but I've got no evidence that there are such sites that would deliver this quantum of housing. So to continue, the site itself is between two others. It fills in a lump of a sort of dogleg in a boundary, if you like. It does seem to have good links to the rest of Thurston, the schools, and to the railway station. It has some environmental benefits. There are various buffers invented and green corridors, which certainly are much more beneficial than they were on previous occasions, previous iterations of this plan. So it clearly has a range of benefits. I also noticed that the Bunbury Arms developments, that was an area where we really felt that we were just not getting sufficient detail, that highways had thought the problem through, and that we had a deliverable scheme. We had some imagination, at my estimation, at previous meetings, but we now seem to have that quite adequately detailed. It's clearly not in existence, and we don't have an absolute guarantee that anybody would get through and build carry out the modifications. But it seems to me that the technological stuff has been done pretty thoroughly, and there's no earthly reason why there shouldn't be a delivery. The cash is available to do that. The one that still leaves me with considerable doubt, I guess, is the station. There we seem to have a process that wanders on and on and on. There are a set of things that need to be determined, but they, to my mind, are relatively simple. Even things like, who does the land belong to? Could we compulsorily purchase it if the owner is not forthcoming with a reasonable price for converting that land to station access? We just don't seem to get anywhere, despite the passage of a considerable number of months. And we're now told it's going to take another 6 months to get to the end of a feasibility study. Give me strength, I'm inclined to say. So I feel at the moment that this scheme has been thoroughly thought through now. That's a pleasant change from previous iterations, and I am inclined to support it. I will nevertheless listen to other councillors and see what I have judged correctly or misjudged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gould, would you like to go next?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking Vincent for his presentation, which was comprehensive, even by his own standards. And as others have said, there's clearly been some very considerable progress made since this was previously before us. And that progress is offering substantial public benefits, which again Vincent has described in his presentation. And on that front, I'd take Councillor Eben's point that it gives a sense of the value of the democratic side of this process if through questioning and challenging application, what's on offer, can be improved in the way that it has been. And those, what is on offer there, those improvements are reliant on us approving this application. I can well understand the concerns about the apparent conflicts between the neighbourhood development plan and the strategic housing needs that are kind of emerging through work on the joint local plan, and an increased more pressure is probably in prospect as a result of the planning reforms and the targets that come with that. But I think that if we were to refuse this application on the basis of too much housing, as it were, that we would do well to succeed in that argument at appeal. I hear what Councillor Richardson says about the policy within the neighbourhood development plan and looking at prioritising sites within the settlement boundary. But though, as has been said, those sites haven't been identified. In any case, we can only look at the application that's before us. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you for that. Well, I hopefully don't repeat too many of the things that people might have said earlier, but I've been listening to the debate and I've had input and read many papers and briefings. And while I'm talking, I wonder if Vince could just put up the plan which shows where this sits within all the other plans that are going ahead. I've listened to the local community and I've read many emails which have been sent to me, as have all of us. And I've listened to the ward member, and neighbourhood plans are a big part of our future. But as just has been explained, and I asked the questions, could we find the alternative sites? And at the moment, that really is almost an impossible request. We are looking at this application. I think much of the improvement has been excellent, and I do hope that the community feel that they have been listened to with the concerns of people. The Bunbury Arms, I know that area quite well, and I think providing we can get all the additional improvements down there, I wonder if we can get them through earlier. I don't know how that might happen. The railway line, I think Councillor Field summed it up really, is that we are sort of slowly going through there, but it's not insurmountable. There could be some compulsory purchase, there could be some improvements there. And with 100,000 that we've got from Mid-Suffolk going into there, that really needs to move forward pretty quickly. We can't keep questioning every time another planning application comes before us and say, no, we don't like this, we don't like that. But we've had the opportunity in this instance to have a couple of requests. So suffice it to say, there are so many benefits and that I will be supporting this. Thank you.
you. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. I, like many others, feel that the improvements and enhancements on this have been brilliant, and it's a shame they didn't come up beforehand. You know, I hear what Harry says about the neighbourhood plan, and I've said this before, you know, I hate going against the village's neighbourhood plans, but I think that the connectivity to this site for the rest of the village is excellent. It has got developments both sides of it. It's a very sustainable location. For cycling and walking, it's excellent. I like the improved green corridor down the centre. I like the improved buffers. I think that the improvements at Bunbury Arms would be excellent, and with the mover system, you know, that would be a really good improvement for the area. And like I say, you know, it's something that, you know, anyone that goes to Bury is going to, you know, appreciate. The 2 zebra crossings is obviously going to be a safety issue, which is also excellent. And yeah, I think that, you know, it's a really good application now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Sorry. Right, Chair. Sorry about the delay there.
No problem.
Yeah, like Councillor Eburn, it's interesting to see the benefits we've had from deferring the site previously, although remembering that in January we were recommended approval. It just shows that it could have been improved and has been improved, which is good. I share the doubts about the station. It is quite difficult to solve the problem. We'll see what the feasibility study says, but it doesn't guarantee a solution, unfortunately. But my main issue with this really is that the identified housing need. We're working with some very contentious methodology, which has come up with some very large numbers that we're in the middle of wrestling with in terms of the joint local plan, and there is not a need to actually deliver sites and decisions to fill up the numbers that are being calculated by the end of next year. We've actually got until 2036 to find and build all these houses. So the question of alternative sites that might become available, I'd point to the windfall, where we've actually each year we find a substantial number of sites that were not allocated and weren't recognised previously, which turn into houses across the district in all sorts of different places. And so I think that there is not that great rush. Now, I note what Councillor Richardson said about the neighbourhood plan. The point is that policy number 1 is not the be all and end all. It is refined by subsequent policies, notably the one that says within the settlement boundary. And so I think we have to take that qualification of the general intention of policy number 1 into consideration. And finally, I would say in making a judgment about this, we should bear in mind that one of the 3 legs of sustainability in the eyes of the NPPF is actually social sustainability, and the speed, the likely speed, let us say at the moment, of the expansion of Thurston is going to really strain the cohesion of that community, because there will be huge numbers of new people trying to find their feet and get involved in the community, and that's not a fast process, it's a slow process. So that's why I would point to the fact that the identified need is to be met between now and 2036, not immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. Councillor Mellon, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I probably should just point out that I wasn't on a planning committee when this application came up previously, so I'm sort of coming to it afresh, having not been part of the previous discussions. And I find myself in sort of two minds about it, because obviously there's clearly a lot of things which would recommend this site in terms of its proximity to the centre of Thurston, a lot of the measures that have been outlined, but I still have some concerns. The highways, people have said that the road impact is no longer severe, but I'm sort of wondering what it is. Is it moderate? Is it considerable? Is it chronic? There's obviously some continuing impact even with the measures that have been proposed. To my mind, knowing that area fairly well, the Bunbury Arms junction, although potentially a pinch point, is only one of a number of junctions that will be affected by the increased traffic in and around Thurston. And though I welcome the proposed changes there and the upgrade there, I don't see that we can condition it on this application. It's something we don't have it in our control. Turning to the health centre impact at Woolpit, obviously the increased capacity there is welcome again, but there are huge numbers of houses coming to Elmswell and Woolpit who will be the primary users of that health facility. And again, we can't condition an increase in capacity there on this application. The improvements to the railway station, it would be great to see those coming forward faster, but again, we can't condition them, as far as I understand it, on this application. So I think we come back to the point that Phil Isbell made, which is that we're on the kind of horns of a dilemma in terms of policy. We have on the one hand the Thurston neighbourhood plan, and then on the other hand the sort of the district policy and where those two conflict. So I'm interested to hear a bit more of the debate. Councillor Richardson, as always, makes very cogent argument in favour of turning this down. But that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Councillor Mayer.
Thank you, Chair. I too was not involved in the last time this came before the referral committee, and I have to say it's benefited from the scrutiny that has been given this plan, and the plan itself, I think, has a lot to commend it. The neighbourhood plan is an interesting one, but we as a district have been given targets to build houses, and indeed we pass those down and set targets for different centres, key service centres like Thurston, and I don't see how the neighbourhood plan can almost draw up the wagons and refuse to get involved. So I think saying that development should happen within the settlement boundary, well, I can't see, just from a quick check of the map and the aerial photographs, I can't see where 400 houses are going to go. So I'm not sure the neighbourhood plan actually holds water. The strategic infrastructure, that worries me. We generate the money's available, and that does not mean that the health service or the surgeries or indeed any of this comes to fruition. And it would be very nice to condition this approval on the highways infrastructure improvements, and indeed an increase to the Woolpit health facilities. Though as a key service centre, I don't see why Thurston shouldn't have its own health service facility. The MOVA software intrigues me. I I couldn't help but have a visage, a little in my mind's eye, a Monday morning where the software's failed, and what chaos would occur with the lights. Hopefully, there's a fallback system that would allow it to function should that active system fail, and every active system does fail. It is a logical infill, and I particularly like the fact that this is one of the few planning applications that's come before us where someone could actually live without a car and work in Cambridge or work in London. And I don't think we should underestimate the positive impact of climate change that someone using a bike rather than a car can have. And this is one such planning application. So in balance, I'm in favour. I think the proposal is a sound one, and I think I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've listened to my colleagues speaking, and I do actually agree with a lot of what has been said. I do think this is a considerable improvement to what we actually saw back in January. I think both the applicant and the planning department done a fantastic job to try and get all these different things actually included in this sort of recommendation. I did have one point really that was mentioned in the ward member's statement, Councillor Turner's statement, regarding each vehicle is estimated to have 5 journeys per day based on 450 homes, 1,200 people, 6,000 journeys a day. I do question that because obviously that seems to be more subjective rather than objective. But on the whole, yes, I do like the revised plan, and I feel that I can support this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Norris.
Thank you. Obviously, a lot of positive work has gone into refining this application to meet the points raised in the January committee meeting. Whilst I fully agree that we should support neighbourhood plans, however, the Thurston neighbourhood plan does not appear to meet the identified housing requirement for Thurston. It's rather difficult to come down on either side regarding this application, but I am struggling to identify defensible planning reasons for refusing this application, and therefore I am inclined to support it. However, I will listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. Thurston, I start from the policy position of the most recent and heaviest weight document that we should be using in determining this application. And that document is the Made Thurston Neighbourhood Plan. It's the last document to go through an inspection and indeed a referendum of those of which any development will have impact on. It is the most up-to-date document for the determination of this plan application and the one that I will be giving the most weight. This application site is not within the defined boundary of that plan. We agreed that plan, the community agreed that plan, the government agreed that plan. If we didn't like it, we should have said so then. So should the government. It isn't even a reserve site in that plan, and actually could be a reserve site even when the plan has to be reviewed, because within 5 years, neighbourhood plans have to be reviewed. So the correct policy way of looking at this should be to refuse this site now because it's not in the settlement boundary. But if the housing numbers are not delivered, and by the way, Mid Suffolk's delivering 7.14 against 5-year housing land supply at the moment, if we don't deliver the numbers required by government, it can form part of an orderly review, and we can work with that community to deliver this site if it is needed. The case officer at the start said that Thurston is a core service centre, second only to towns. Well, in our draft joint local plan, the town of Needham Market only has 186 homes for 25 years to deliver. There's more on this site that's outside of the defined settlement boundary of Thurston than in the whole of Needham Market. It seems to me like the villagers are going to seek to deliver far more than the towns, and that's unsustainable. So what we're then asked to do is actually look at adverse impacts of approving something. And personally, I think the biggest adverse impact of approving this will be the decimation of the neighbourhood plan here, and the confidence and commitment of all those that worked in it will have then been watered down, and you'll have less neighbourhood plans coming, and people think, why should they bother if a neighbourhood plan can just be so easily brushed aside? So for me, the neighbourhood plan is very sacrosanct in this. And we're asking them where they're going to deliver this other 400. Why are we criticising a community for delivering a document that the government has approved and that we have approved? I really don't understand. I think the highways are still a major concern because it's based on data that has a presumption that's not from here. It includes a presumption from the whole of the country, when in fact we know that vehicle use in Suffolk has actually had a trend of going upwards. When aggregated against the whole of the country, that's very misleading. And if that is wrong, we're in trouble before we even start. The health infrastructure, the case officer said, well, we as ward members, where we're concerned about health, should be having meetings with the CCG. Yes, I've already done that. And for the Baxton residents that use Woolpit and that their health centre is closed, we were told, guess what? Go and put an application into the SIL pot. I can tell you, if one of these health facilities puts in a bid into the SIL pot's gone. It's not an elastic pot. It's not bottomless. You can only spend this money the once. So frankly, I think this application, as pretty as it looks, is an ideal one for review, and it's certainly one I couldn't support here today because of the decimation of a made neighbourhood plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Warboys.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think there are some issues here. There's obviously been a great deal of effort. There's demonstrated a lot of joined up thinking between different authorities. And thank you for the shout out about Fishwick Corner, which shows coordinated work between West Suffolk District Council and Bloor Developments to improve traffic management. I find it quite difficult. I do appreciate the background to this. There is enormous pressure on Mid Suffolk District Council to bring forward housing. This pressure is from central government. They calculate our housing needs with their specific algorithm, which, according to government papers, they're wanting to change, which will, according to Rob Baker, which will more or less double the amount of housing Mid Suffolk District Council are going to have to bring forward. But that's a debate perhaps to have outside this meeting. I think that the work that has been done on the infrastructure does address quite a lot of the challenges that are within that are identified within the neighbourhood plan. Shortage of certain types of houses. There's going to be 73 affordable houses of different kinds. The developments, the various road junctions are going to be improved. I think some of the, as Councillor Stringer says, I think this is quite a pretty proposal. I think it does provide a sort of increase in biodiversity. There's sort of 20-metre buffers along the sides of it. There is joined up thinking with regards to the cycle paths in terms of its sustainability. I think it is a worry that sort of outside providers like the healthcare providers, and in particular Network Rail, the station, how they are lagging behind, and the those infrastructure improvements that are needed now or at least to be sort of underway. As Councillor Richards says, the cumulative effects of this development on Thurston are enormous. Councillor Turner had mentioned an enormous increase in the amount of journeys. Whether Officer Harvey could sort of clarify that, I think 6,000 per day is a frightening number. But there is without doubt a substantial increase in traffic already, and there will be further increase in traffic. There is a tension between the neighbourhood plan and the emerging local plan and where the housing is going to be. I think the identified challenges within the neighbourhood plan have been addressed. I think a really good effort has been made to meet them. I have got some doubts as to whether it is just enough, or whether there is going to be any spare capacity for any future development. Even though that could be greeted with sort of a somewhat negative response from Thurston. So I think that a lot of good work has been done. I think it is vastly improved the application. And it does demonstrate the fact that if time is taken over these applications, that there is time to sort of produce more convincing arguments in favour of it. I think I'm going to have to stop there. I still haven't quite made my mind up whether to approve it or not.
Thank you, Councillor Warboys. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a few comments myself. I always like to come in at the end. Then I'll pass it on to Philip Isbell, and then after Philip's been, then we'll open it up for members to, if you want to have further discussions or you want to put proposals, I'll leave that up to you. But from where I sit, this has come a long way from where we were many months ago. And for me, the road junctions was something that lots of people have been unhappy about. And it's good to see that a large number of work has taken place to move forward as much as we can on the concerns that have been raised. And actually, I think this shows the benefit of things coming to committee, and where members aren't happy on what we can actually achieve when we show our concerns. Clearly, to have, I've never heard of tiger crossings before, but to have Zebra Plus, or tigers they're called, that's clearly a huge benefit, particularly with the comings and goings, obviously, around the college. We've also seen now what I would really describe genuinely as significant environmental upgrades. And we had concerns about the buffer, the widths of the buffer, and to see them come in and to have listened and to come back with 20 metres, I welcome that. So it does really feel that the committee has had concerns. A lot of those have been addressed. Now, Councillor Warboys summed it up very eloquently, and it is the ongoing conflict that we all have at lots of these meetings between the neighbourhood plan and the emerging local plan, and that's something that obviously each of us will have to weigh up in our minds. We've heard different degrees of weight, but I do say that I do congratulate actually officers and the applicant for actually having taken forward so many of the points and really having brought this forward with such significant changes. So, I think that shows the work the committee has done well. So before I open it up to other members, that's enough from me. I'll hand over to Philip Isbell, who wants to just come in before we then can go through round two, or however anyone else wishes to take it forward from debate. But Philip, over to you first.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just wanted to pick up on a point, because there was a little discussion around both the neighbourhood plan and this question of housing need. So just to go back to what the neighbourhood plan actually says, as I did indicate, the neighbourhood plan, paragraph 4.2, it acknowledges it's for the JLP to ultimately address the OAN, the objectively assessed housing need for the two districts. So there's a recognition locally of that, and the neighbourhood plan then goes on to say it's not expected that significant additional growth will need to be planned for in Thurston to support the emerging JLP. I guess that speaks to a tension in the kind of strategy that we have here. And in terms of housing need, I think you have a paper that will be coming on a government consultation. It'll be coming to full council imminently about the potential change to the housing methodology. Well, consultation is only a consultation, it's not a conclusion, but I think we've heard plenty from this government about delivering on housing need, and the change to the housing methodology that is currently being proposed would effectively uplift the baseline for Mid Suffolk, by a considerable amount of new households. So this question of housing and its contribution, accepting that we may well have over a 5-year supply, the question of housing need is going to continue to be important in the question of how neighbourhood plans accommodate that and are realistic about that. And I would simply sort of reiterate that when you see appeal decisions, wherever they are, and perhaps the most relevant local one was in relatively recently, the delivery of housing attracts substantial weight. And in this scheme we have a significant affordables content, and another element of the current government consultation is to reduce that outturn for windfall sites. And I believe Councillor, one colleagues committee members in the meeting have discussed the role of windfall sites. They are important in our district, so we have an opportunity to capture both housing need, and I think the fact that we may be in excess of 5-year supply would not cut any mustard with an inspector were we to defend an appeal against a refusal. And to that extent, you have to weigh the need aspect of the relationship with the neighbourhood plan very, very carefully. I's neighbourhood plan was ambitious in its delivery of housing against need, and the inspector drew an on-balance conclusion. I find that quite telling. So I don't want to add anything else, Chairman, because I think I've said enough. I simply wanted to point out that the recommendation exists both within the recommended papers that you have in the committee paper and in the table papers, because there are some additional items on page 4 and 5 of the tabled papers, which are in addition to the recommendation in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Vincent, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a little bit about the station improvements that we've already secured ahead of the feasibility study, because I think, Councillor Field, you made a good point about how quickly can those improvements come forward. But I'd remind members that the Bayton Road scheme, in providing the footpath widening under the bridge to 1.5 metres width, that is sufficient to safely accommodate any additional rail usage from the Gladman development. We've been very careful with our colleagues in Suffolk County Highways to analyse that, and so Gladman development itself will not add unduly to issues at the station. So what we're looking at is, in terms of the feasibility study, is enhancements for the whole village. Just wanted to make that point clear. Thank you, Chair.
Can you just while I've got you on there, just clarify, because the recommendation is on page 10A and 11A of the papers, through to 12A through to 13A, and are you saying with the addition of the late papers that are on page 4 to be added, 4 and 5 to be added, just so we're 100% clear?
I am, Chair, and the reason they were added to that table paper was, having listened again to the meeting from the 29th of January, it was clear that when members moved to a vote, there were a number of items that came up that I thought would be equally appropriate at this point in time. So we have included those. Were you minded to grant planning permission?
Yeah, so what you're saying is the recommendation before us is on page 10A, 11A, 12A and 13A of the papers that that were sent to us. In addition, we want to add the late papers to those as additional items.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Just so I'm 100% clear.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Okay, next up is Councillor Matheson. So we'll go around again.
Thank you. In light of what Mr. Isbell was just saying, could he could he say quite why we would need to approve this application at this time rather than in 2025 or 2030, following what Councillor Stringer reasonably described as an orderly review of the neighbourhood plan?
Thank you. Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, very simply, if we take all of the plans which form the development plan together, and without boring you with this, you would have to identify adverse impacts which significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies taken as a whole within the NPPF. You do not have up-to-date policies that deal with the strategic and detailed location of new housing growth, so the presumption in favour of sustainable development will engage. Whether or not you consider that you have already granted a number of decisions already, the presumption operates here and will govern any decision made on it. So you have to take account of that. Notwithstanding the ideal of a review process, I'm afraid that's a luxury which the NPPF does not afford you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would like to move approval of this application based on the recommendations in the papers that we currently have. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, you caught me slightly on the hop there. Hold on. Okay, thank you. Councillor Guthrie, you're next.
Yeah, well, I was going to move it, but he's jumped the gun on me. Well done. And I will second it. Thank you. With the additional items that were discussed a moment ago. Thank you.
Okay. We've still got plenty of time for debate if people want it. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just concerned that if we, well, not concerned, but if members are looking to, having heard from people looking to support this, I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification on one of the conditions. It's on page 11A, and it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth one down, and it refers to package of delivery of the package of footway, cycleway, pedestrian, etc. And it says within an agreed timetable. I was just wondering if on the conditions we could get some more clarity as to whether that agreed timetable can be, say, for example, before the first house is built, before should be my ideal, before the first house is occupied or whatever. Thank you, Chair.
Well, let's have clarity, first of all, from Vincent, then we can go back to the proposer and seconder.
I think the committee have made it clear in recent weeks, I'm thinking particularly of Stow Upland, that it would be appropriate for the condition to say the package of works, particularly the crossings, would have to be in place prior to first occupation. I think that would give members the comfort of knowing that the safe routes to school and the ability to move around by foot and cycle with those three key junctions that we illustrated would be in place. And I think that would also go some way to satisfying you, Councillor Warboys, on the same issue. The question of the junction at Bunbury Arms is more difficult because that will be developed, installed by Suffolk County Council. But I see no reason why the other package of works couldn't be subject to a condition that says installed prior to occupation.
Okay, so that's on the delivery of package of footway, cycleway, pedestrians prior to first occupation. Are you happy with that, Councillor Muller and Councillor Guthrie?
Yes, I'm happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Field, you're next.
I was just going to comment on the housing need and the numbers that are reflected through into the Thurston neighbourhood plan. As I understood it from previous meetings and previous discussions, perhaps those numbers are not numbers the government proposes, and then we may debate and decide whether we're going to meet or not. they are essentially a mandatory requirement. You shall meet those numbers. And if you don't meet those numbers, ultimately your toys are taken away from you. There is a way of overriding alternative decisions. So I think it's fairly paramount that we meet those, and that we meet those on plans that we've discussed, we've progressed, we've obtained various improvements to, and that the decision, to my mind, is ours, not that we take the easy option of bouncing it off onto the inspectorate on every occasion. That to me shows a lack of courage, if you like, in our own convictions. So I was just going to make that point. If I'm wrong, please let someone tell me I am wrong, but I believe the numbers we must meet are essential, and that we don't have the option of reviewing them in a few years' time. Thank you.
Vincent or Phil, do you want to come in on that?
Sorry, Chairman. Yes. Yeah. In essence, the methodology is not nationally imposed, but there is a proposal to make it a national methodology. But that said, we are expected to meet those targets, as Councillor Field says, and we do not have the luxury of not meeting those targets. So, yeah, I agree absolutely with the sentiment that he describes. There are difficult decisions in the middle of this, and we can all probably learn lessons around the support and extent of contribution we had to the preparation of the neighbourhood plan. But we are here, and we must work with what we have. And I would hope that from here on, there is a different approach. But meeting the need is not a choice you can turn away from.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. You're next.
I want to come back on what's been said by our leader planning. I've seen it written more than twice now. From independent planning advisors, that invoking a tilted balance upon the data of an up-to-date neighbourhood plan is actually an incorrect appreciation of the policy situation. And I don't know where we get this idea that if a government lobs a figure at a district, that it has to go into one parish. I don't understand where we're getting that logic from. Yes, we have to deliver the number, but our own plans don't show that all of that number should be practically in one or two parishes. Our draft joint local plan has not been through that government inspection. The draft joint local plan, where you're deriving these numbers from, and where the proportions of those numbers go, disproportionately affect villages without health facility in their own parish against towns. 3 of your parishes are delivering less than this one village. So that has not yet been tested. So what you're then suggesting, we'll just keep adding more because we've got to add more numbers because government keep putting them onto us. And we must deliver them. Yes, we must deliver them. But actually, you need to deliver them across the district, and your proportion of where you're going to deliver them has not yet been tested by that government. So it doesn't show that we have the courage of our convictions by approving something that our community and ourselves have agreed shouldn't be approved. That actually shows cowardice, and we should defend our neighbourhood plans because they are the most recent document.
Anything you want to add, Philip, to that?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I think I've said enough about the presumption in favour of.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, to me, the import of approving this site would be to undermine the work of neighbourhood plan groups across the district. And if any community was asking me, is it worth putting in the time and effort to make a neighbourhood plan on the basis of this and recent decisions, from Stoupland to Mendlesham and now to Thurston, I would not recommend that they bother. Why is it that we accept a plan and then seek to overturn it or undermine it or circumvent it at the earliest opportunity? I do rate these plans, and I will not be voting in favour of this development.
Yeah, I think that's the point that's been made so eloquently by Councillor Warboys earlier, isn't it? It's the weighing up of the neighbourhood plan versus the emerging local plan. Anyway, okay, I have no more hands up. So it has been proposed by Councillor Muller and seconded by Councillor Guthrie, as per the recommendation in our papers on page 3A through to 11A, through to 13A, and additionally, on the late papers that were submitted, which is page 3 through to page 5, they are additional items with the inclusion in the recommendation under the delivery of the package for footway, cycleway, pedestrian cycle crossings to an agreed timetable, and we're putting in there prior to first occupation. So on that basis, we will go to a vote. I'll now ask Claire to please do a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Members, if I could ask you to say for, against or abstain when I call your name. Councillor James Caston.
For.
Councillor Rachel Eburn.
Against.
Councillor John Field.
For.
Councillor Peter Gould.
For.
Councillor Kathy Guthrie.
For.
Councillor Lavinia Haddingham.
For.
Councillor Matthew Hicks.
For.
Councillor John Matheson.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Mellon.
Against.
Councillor Richard Mayer.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mellon.
Oh, you've done him.
Oh, I do apologise. Councillor David Muller.
For.
Councillor Mike Norris.
For.
Councillor Andrew Stringer.
Against.
And Councillor Roland Warboys.
For.
Thank you. I make that 10 votes for and 4 against. If you could confirm that, please, Ian.
Yes, this is legal advice. I confirm 10 votes for, 4 against.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to the officers for preparing everything, and to Claire and Mandy for getting everything together for us online. Close the meeting at 12:37 and see you again soon, no doubt. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew.